Welcome back to another chess game analysis video. Today I want to show you a game between Yang Ji and Richard Rapport, and this game features a very nice opening that I haven't shown on the channel yet, and also a very instructive endgame technique that I think is very interesting, and especially because I'm not really a good endgame player, I wanted to take a look at this game and analyze it for you as well. So the game opens with d4 here, we have d5, the queen's pawn opening, we have a queen's gambit c4, and now instead of going into an Indian game with like knight f6, or you can also defend the pawn, there is knight c6. This is called the Chigorin defense of the queen's pawn opening, a very interesting way to approach this position. Um, so we have development knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, d takes c4, and now we have e4. Now white has a nice center and is probably going to win back the pawn with the bishop, and that's why the engine slightly favors white. But this is definitely playable with black. If you want to take a look at this and study some theory, I think it's a very interesting opening. So we have bishop g4, now pinning the knight. We have bishop e3 development, protecting the d4 pawn, which is under attack. e6, bishop takes c4. We have bishop b4, now trying to overload the knight and take the pawn. We have queen d3 defending everything. Bishop h5, a prophylactic move. In this position you can also castle. There have been plenty of Grandmaster games in the database which feature castles or bishop h5. Definitely all still theory. Has all been played before. You can definitely do this. Bishop b5, now pinning the knight. Bishop g6. Now the c3 knight here is pinned, so now the threat is that bishop or knight take the pawn on e4. So the other knight goes back knight d2 and defends the pawn. Now we have castles and castles. Now an equal position but some space advantage for white, so this is why white is slightly to be preferred here, but it's definitely playable and an interesting position for black. I think it's quite a lot of nice piece harmony here going on. Um, but the space disadvantage for black a little bit nasty. At some point you might need to play e4, e5 to free yourself and get some space. So black now has this idea, knight g4 attacking the h2 pawn and the bishop. So in this position, because of the bishop pin, knight d5 would have been a very nice move, attacking the knight and the bishop, trying to trade off one of the pieces. And after, for instance, bishop takes c6, b takes c6, you can't really take here with the knight and trade off one of the pieces because d takes c5, and black is better, the pawn is pinned, and everything is a little bit cluttered here in the middle. So that's why knight d5 would have been a very nice tactical way of resolving some tension in the center between the pieces. But knight g4 is also very much playable. We have bishop takes c6, trying to destroy black's pawn structure, and this would be a little bit nasty to get this double isolated c-pawn. So this is why Richard Rapport here played queen d6, threatening checkmate, and after white defends against checkmate, you can recapture with the queen, having the pawn structure still perfectly fine here on the queen side. A good maneuver, I think, avoiding this isolated pawn. With a3 asking the bishop a question, bishop a5, you don't want to trade the bishop for the knight on c3. King h1 has been played. I think rook ac1, aligning the rook with the queen and developing the rook would have been a very natural move, but king h1, we're going to see that the king is not ideally placed on h1 because it's behind its pawns and therefore it doesn't really have an escape room, and there are back rank issues later in the game as we're going to see. So king h1 a little bit questionable of a decision because the king was not really in danger here on g1. But so now black decides to trade off the knight for the bishop. Queen takes on e3, and now we see very nice center. And we have a knight pair against a bishop pair. And depending on whether or not the position actually opens, it's questionable which of the two pairs is better in this position. The engine says nil-nil, so it's an equal position. The bishop pair normally overpowers the knight pair, but with these three very nice central pawns, white has some space advantage, so an equal and interesting position in my opinion. So we have f6, trying to stop the pawns, I think. It's a little bit of a prophylactic move, also creates a very nice escape square for the bishop here. With b4, now expanding on the queen side, white really gets a lot of initiative here with the pawns being pushed forward, but the engine slightly prefers black here. Maybe the pawns are also overextended, we're gonna see that. Knight b3, activating the knight with e5, now striking in the center, one trade, f takes e5, f takes e5. Now we have opened the f file for the rooks, but both sides can profit from that in some way. With knight c5 going in there, e takes d4, a trade in the center, queen takes d4. Now you can't really attack the queen. I first thought maybe you can win back a tempo on the queen, develop the rook, but white is just going to trade off one pair of rooks, and the rook has to capture, and you haven't won anything here. So this is why in this position queen d6 was played, trying to offer a queen trade, and queen d5 was played, check. Interestingly enough, if you take here with the queen and you trade the queens on black's turn, then c takes d6, knight d7 going in there, one rook trade, and then bishop d4. A very strong bishop pair. The knight is attacked, the e-pawn is kind of weak. It's questionable if the knight here on d7 is ever getting out of there. Maybe it can also be trapped here. So the engine favors here, favors black here because the activity of the very nice bishops in this open position. So this is why in this position white should not trade the queens on black's turn, but rather he has to force a queen trade on d5. Queen d5 check, and now black trades the queens, queen takes, and we have e takes. Now the pawn is a little bit better on d5 instead of e4, not constantly being attacked. We have one rook trade, rook takes f1, check, rook takes f1. We have a5, now trying to destabilize this very nice structure here. Knight 3 a4, we have a takes b4, we have a takes b4, bishop takes c5, now giving up the bishop pair. The bishop is a little bit in a cage here, so maybe it's okay to just give it up here. Knight takes. We see the structure has changed a little bit. White has now got these two isolated pawns, but they are quite far advanced. It's questionable whether or not this is a weakness or a stronghold. While as black structure is better and he has the bishop. So the engine says nil-nil, but we're gonna see how this develops. We have bishop f7 now attacking the pawn. And I said in the beginning of this video, the pawns are a little bit overextended. We're gonna see now how black actually deals with these overextended pawns. First he attacks it with the bishop. Now the knight blocks. We have bishop takes e6, we have d takes e6, and now this pawn is definitely overextended. It's gonna get attacked by the rook, rook e1, trying to hold on to the pawn, but we're gonna see black has got two pieces that are very close to the pawn, while as white, the king is still here and has back rank issues, so the rook is gonna try to hold on to the pawn, but if the black rook ever moves away, there are some traps to get checkmated, so you need to be very careful. And now the e-pawn is definitely a weakness. The engine also favors black 1.5, so we're gonna see how black deals with this. First of all, because of time trouble, probably the players repeated moves, and now you don't go back and draw the game, but you want to win with black, so king e7 only move, trying to attack the pawn with your king now. Activating the king as well. You see the activity of the pieces. Black is definitely more active with the king, the white king here in the corner, not participating in the game at all. We have rook f7 check, king takes e6. Rook takes c7. So now basically one pair of pawns has been traded, but black is way more active attacking the white rook, and now you need to be careful. If you grab another pawn with the rook, you're gonna get checkmated. That's why I said the white king is not well placed. So instead you need to move the rook all the way back to c1, where it's a little bit passive, and we see the white pieces are kind of passive, while as black now can activate the pieces very nicely. Rook e4 attacking the pawn, rook b1 now very passive on the back rank and from behind defending your own pawn. b5 gaining some space. We're gonna see how Rapport plays this position very interestingly for me to learn this rook endgame. Now finally at some point you need to activate the king, king g1, king d5, and we see it's white now who's definitely trying to hold on to this and draw the game somehow, but it's not easy. King f2, g5, now black gains space on the king side. King f3, h5, very nice maneuvering, because you've got all the time in the world. White is basically out of moves, you can only move the king back and forth or the rook back and forth, and black can make progress on the king side by advancing the pawns. We have h3 trying to prevent g4 further advancement of the pawns. Rook c4 now attacking, still holding this very nice restriction on the white king, and at some point maybe the black king can enter the position. Rook d1 check, rook d4. Black wants to trade off the rooks, which white doesn't want. Rook b1, rook d3 check, now further activating the rook. Now the rook is on the third rank instead of the fourth rank. Rook d4 back, which is a slight inaccuracy. I think the very straightforward plan in this position is not going back with the rook, but king c4, activating the king even further and trying to win this pawn with two pieces. Rook e1, for instance, white needs to, this is a computer analysis, of course, but rook e1 trying to get counterplay, you can't hold on to the pawn anyway. Rook e5, king c4, and you can take the pawns on the king side, but it's not gonna matter too much because at some point the b pawn is just gonna queen, and even if you get all the pawns on the king side, it's just you have to sacrifice the rook in the end for the black queen. And I think this was a very straightforward way to win this game, king c4. The engine even says -4, so there is no reasonable defense for white in this position, but somehow our pawn went back with d4. Now we have king e3, rook e4 check, king d3. Still black is a little bit better, but not much. King e5, rook b2. In this position, actually, the engine wants to play rook c1, interestingly enough, and get counterplay. At some point, you need to activate your rook. If you're playing just with a passive rook on b1, it's not gonna, you're not gonna survive for much longer. So. But rook b2 was played, and now this allows rook d4 check, king e3, rook c4. You also need to put the black rook on the c file so that the white rook doesn't infiltrate like this. So this is very nicely placed rook. King d3, we have h4, now gaining even more space. Rook e2 check, king f5, rook f2 check, rook f4, trying again to trade off the rooks. Rook b2, g4, now trying to break through. You have gained some space on the king side, now it's time to break through. King e3, rook e4 check, king d3, putting the king a little bit further away from the action. Always these in-between checks with the rook are very nice to just gain one more square that the rook controls and the opposing king doesn't. With rook c4, again going back, king e3. A little bit back and forth. I'm not sure if both players actually were in time trouble, but the plans are not that straightforward. It's not that easy to win here with black. But with black, you just wait, I think, for a mistake. Rook b3, definitely not the best move, and now the black king can infiltrate on the second rank. Rook c2, rook a3, trying to activate the rook, but this now loses a pawn. Rook takes g2, rook a5, rook g3 check, king f2, now rook takes h3, another pawn is gone. Rook takes b5 check, king f4, king g2, rook b3, now you're behind the white pawn, which is not going anywhere, and you have these very nice pawns. There is also ideas of maybe just checkmating the white king here without promotion. So in this position, while the engine says it's a forced mate in 13 if you play correctly, white resigned the game here. It's very hard to hold this. I don't think that's that you can even cause technical problems because you just up this very nice pawn, and the two connected pass pawns are just going to promote and win the game here. Also, activity of the pieces. It's again the same story for the whole game. I'm not sure whether or not this position here before rook b3 is actually won. I would be very interested in what you guys think in the comment section. Is it possible to win this with black if with white plays perfectly, or do you just need to wait and see and gain space and win the position at some point? I think the most straightforward way to win was this king c4 in this position. Here is definitely a one end game. But the end, it was a little bit strange, but it's rook end games. You need to be so precise. It's so difficult, and even for top grandmasters like you and Rapport, this is a very dangerous, very dangerous to not lose the game in the end, even if you make a slight mistake and try to hold on to a draw. In the end, you're gonna lose the game, maybe. So I hope you liked this game. I hope you liked the opening, seeing Chigorin defense for once, and an instructive rook endgame. I definitely learned some nice opening theory from this game. I hope you liked it. If you want to see your own games analyzed, you can send them in, of course. If you want to see another game that you like for me to analyze, you can also send that in. Check out my Twitch if you want to see live chess gameplay. Check out my Instagram and see you soon. Bye.